Official Missourians will be voting on sports betting, abortion, and the minimum wage this November. The Secretary of State approved the 3 petitions today. Our Missouri Capitol reporter Hannah Falcon breaks down one of those ballot questions for us. Hannah?
Of those 3 ballot questions approved today, the abortion petition is the most controversial. While the other 2 petitions don't have any organized opposition, the abortion petition has already faced many challengers, and that will continue as we approach November. The proposed constitutional amendment seeks to restore access to abortion and protect access to contraceptives in Missouri. Missouri was the first state to totally ban abortion following the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
This campaign is about who gets to make personal and private decisions about pregnancy and abortion care, you and your loved ones, or out-of-touch politicians.
And the supporters of restoring abortion access do tell me they plan to start right away campaigning for people to vote in favor of this amendment. But Missouri Right to Life launched an official Vote No campaign today against that abortion question. Reporting live in Jefferson City, I'm Hannah Falcon, KY3 News.